Welcome everybody. I want to welcome you all to the efforts of us celebrating Flag Day. In the United States, Flag Day is celebrated each year on the 14th of June to commemorate the day on which our country adopted its famous Stars and Stripes. Although not an official federal holiday, the Flag Day is observed widely across the United States in a number of ways. And today is our way in observing Flag Day and what the red, white, and blue means to us. So with that, I'll ask Frank Kenzy, Chaplain of the, by the way, my name is Ron Moore. I'm Adjutant of VFW 1681. Frank, Flag Day prayer.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for all of those who have spent their life and those of injury and everything else to preserve our flag. And Lord, be with us in this situation that we're in, that we can overcome it. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Amen.
And I know the next effort is hard, you know, we do it all the time, but when you're up here to lead somebody, you know you're going to forget a word. So with that, I would like to ask Amy Ramos to come up and give us the Pledge of Allegiance. She's Secretary of the Auxiliary.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amy's going to do the history as well.
I'm going to go
Proclamation.
ahead with the
Okay.
Okay. Whereas the American flag is our nation's one great unifying symbol, and whereas the American flag during these challenging times of national uncertainty has once again, as it has for over 2 centuries, brought us comfort to our nation, and whereas the American flag has draped the bodies of fallen soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and loved ones, steadying the hearts of those who tremble and mourn. And whereas the American flag has been clutched by the tender hands of our youngest citizens and by the hardened, calloused hands of our oldest, it has provided reassurance and resolve in troubled times. And whereas we recognize our love for the American flag today, it is our visible bond that binds our heart to our country. It inspires pride in our past and the eternal hope in our future as Americans. Now therefore, I, Pete Ricketts, Governor of the state of Nebraska, do hereby proclaim the 14th day of June as 2020 as Flag Day in Nebraska, and I do hereby urge all citizens to reflect on the great meaning of the American flag that holds for each of us.
Thank you, Amy.
Next on our agenda is the history of the flag, and that will be led, have a seat. And that'll be led by John Brehm.
Alrighty. Well, pretty much knows Betsy Ross was the person who sewn the first flag, seamstress from Philadelphia. Congressman Francis Hopkins, this is unconfirmed, but historians believe he was the one that designed the first flag. In January 1st of 76, the Continental Army was reorganized according to the constitutional resolution, and they had a flag. Washington ordered the Grand Union flag to be hoisted over his base at Prospect Hill. had 13 alternating red and white stripes with the British Union Jack in the upper left corner. June 14, 1777, established official flag for the new nation of Continental Congress passed the first Flag Act. Resolved that the flag of the United States be made of 13 stripes alternating red and white, and the Union be 13 stars, white in a blue field representing a new constellation. Between 1777 and 1960, Congress passed several acts changing the shape, design, and arrangement of the flag that allowed additional stars and stripes to be added to reflect the admission of each new state. Act of January 13, 1774 provided 15 stripes, 15 stars after May of 1795. April 4, 1818 provided 13 stripes, 1 star for each state to be added to the flag on the 4th of July following the admission of each new state signed by President Monroe. Then there was an executive order by President Taft, June 24, 1912, established proportions of the flag and provided the arrangement for the stars in 6 horizontal rows of 8 each, single point of the star pointed upwards. Then Eisenhower, in January 3rd of 59, provided for arrangement of the stars in 7 rows and 7 stars, staggered horizontally and vertically. Later that year, August 21, he provided for the arrangement of the stars in 9 rows, or 9 rows staggering and 11 rows or vertically. The flag got the nickname Old Glory, and it came from a sea captain named William Driver. There was multiple attempts during the Civil War to deface the flag or anything, and it never happened. And I guess it's on display in the Smithsonian still today. Then when the British were trying to bombard us at Fort McHenry, that's when the Star Spangled Banner was written on September 14th, because the flag was still flying high. It's been placed on the moon, it's been on foreign soil, it's been on top of Mount Everest, but it's still flying today. To each of us, the flag means different things. In the current climate, a lot of people use it as a prop. But what it has always done is it's represented the United States of America, what we stand for, what we believe in, what these brave men and women have fought for, died for, been injured for. And there's no way to separate what some are doing now to what the ultimate price has been paid for the flag. Thank you.
Thank you, John. What better way to identify what the flag means to us with the start of a poem by Cecil Dosier.
Couple poems here. The American flag, red and white with 13 stripes, reminds us of our past. The colonies so long ago, some thought they'd never last. And then the stars, although they've changed, for the states both old and new, on a field of blue, they're 50 strong, a home for me and you. So wave your flag and show your pride, and never let it fall, and remember why we pledge each day with liberty and justice for all. A rugged old flag. I walked through a country courthouse square on a park bench, and an old man was sitting there. I said, "The old courthouse is kind of run down." He said, "Ha, it'll do for our little town." I said, "The old flagpole is leaning a little bit. That's a ragged old flag you got hanging on it." He said, "Have a seat." And I sat down. "Is this the first time you have been to our little town?" I said, "I think it is." He said, "I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag there when Washington took it across the Delaware. And it got powder burns the night that Francis Scott Key sat watching it, writing, 'Oh, say, can you see?' And it got a rip in New Orleans when Packingham and Jackson was rubbing it at its seams, and it almost fell at the Alamo. But the Texas flag, but she waved on through. She got out with the sword at Chancellorsville, and she got cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee, Beauregard Braggs, and a south wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. On Flanders Field in World War I, she got a big hole from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II. She hung limp and low a time or two. She was in Korea, Vietnam. She went where she was sent by her Uncle Sam. She was covered with blood and stomped under a boot when our brave Marines were bombed in Lebanon and Beirut. And our armed forces served in the Persian Gulf War. That flag was there, and did she ever soar? She waved our ship upon the briny foam, and now they've about quit waving it back here at home. In her own good land, here she's been abused. She's been burned, dishonored, denied, refused. And the government for which she stands is scandalized throughout the land. And she's getting threadbare and she's wearing thin, but she's in good shape for the shape she's in. Because she's been through the fire before, and I believe she can take a whole lot more. So we raise her up every morning. We take her down every night. We won't let her touch the ground, and we fold her upright. On second thought, I do like to brag, 'cause I'm mighty proud of that ragged old flag.
Thank you, Cecil. Cecil's president of the American Legion Auxiliary Unit number 36. Before we start about the remarks for the meaning of the flag, do you know that when you see a flag with the eagle on it, that eagle's always facing forward? A lot of places just put the flag there, with that eagle facing forward. So remarks, meaning of the flag. I would like to start with Levi Bowlin. He's Senior Vice Commander of the VFW Post, 1681. Levi?
Thank you, Ron. What does the flag mean to me? I had combat deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq both. And to me, first and foremost, these colors represent opportunity. I was born and raised here in the Valley. Anybody that's traveled outside the Valley knows that we're kind of a special place here. We may not be on the cutting edge of everything, and we may not have as much money as elsewhere, but this flag represents opportunity. I've seen the world. I've been all over the U.S. wearing these colors with pride. And after I served my time, it was these colors that I wore that put me through chiropractic school. So I really appreciate the opportunities that we have in America, especially when you sacrifice your time for your country. These colors also represent hope to me. As an example, when we were in Afghanistan, that culture is much different than we have here. They don't appreciate females in that culture like we do here. There's no equality. So when we first got to Pulialam, there were a lot of girl orphans, and there were no orphanages. So U.S. forces, we built an orphanage for these young women. We helped pay for teachers to educate them so that they could go on in life. We brought them food. We brought them the supplies they needed. And you could tell every time that we came by, they would start cheering for us and asking for candy and pens. And so it just gives you an idea of what the humanitarian missions that we do around the world are as well. Similarly, we were in the mountains of Afghanistan in the winter. It gets freezing cold there, snow all over the place. You can get trapped in the mountains. I was with an airborne unit, 2nd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and we dropped in supplies via parachute for the folks in these remote villages. We dropped in shoes. We have kids running around in grocery bags in the snow. They didn't have shoes. It's very, very poor areas in the world. So we gave them hope by delivering these necessary supplies. I was a combat medic. We set up med caps. And we took on anybody that came in that had an issue, whether they had a cough, a cold. You see all kinds of things where they've been injured cutting wood and you have festering wounds. All these things we did, and we wore these colors when we did it, and the people were appreciative. They enjoyed seeing us come into the towns. The last thing that the flag represents to me is freedom. So we have more freedoms here in America than citizens of many other countries have. In this country, we're free to love whoever we want to love. And I know there's some debate on how that happens. I don't want to get into that issue at all. But you're not going to be killed or imprisoned by the government for having a relationship that is viewed as contrary to a religious sect. We're free to pursue any kind of career that we want. You're not told what you'll be from the time that you're in elementary school on. It can be anything you want in America. And I want to close with this. Just because you have the right to do something doesn't make it right. A good friend of mine, Chris Katzenberger, was killed in action in Ghazni, Afghanistan. He was rocketed out of the back of a Humvee. My roommate, Arends Sattler, another Nebraskan from Omaha, was ejected from the turret of that Humvee and suffered substantial injuries to his back. Chris crawled over to him and rendered aid as another medic. After he rendered aid, the helicopter came and took them both to the field hospital where Chris died on an operating table. Every time that we have holidays that celebrate our veterans in our great country, I'm reminded of Chris Katzenberger and what his family must deal with all the time. And I wonder, when people disgrace these colors, when they don't show respect to it, how does his family feel knowing that he gave the ultimate sacrifice for these colors? So, just to close, just because you have the right doesn't make it right. Thank you.
Thank you, Levi. Next, Stephen Jordan, Operation Iraqi Freedom. And Cliff, you're next.
All right, good morning. I want to thank John Brehm and the leadership here at the VFW for their efforts today. to honor Flag Day and the opportunity to speak as well. I served 30 years in the United States Army. Unique thing is that coming here as part of Nebraska, I met Cliff Miller, and it turns out that we were both light fighters in 7th Infantry Division around the same time, though we didn't know each other, but we had similar experiences, so it's very interesting sometimes when you run into someone that has kind of covered the same ground that you've covered during those time frames. As I said, I served 30 years in the Army. I was wounded in Iraq and lost troops there, and we've lost troops since. My paternal grandfather was here from Minnetonka, Nebraska, sugar beet farmer, as just about everybody that lives in Minnetonka was at one point in time or not. Served in World War I in France as a troop there in the trench warfare and the mustard gas and those kind of things. Had a maternal uncle that fought in the Pacific in World War II, and then later on was a Northern China Marine. So I view the flag as a representation of the words duty, honor, country, excuse me, as well as selfless sacrifice. I find it very hurtful, un-American, when entertainers or professional athletes take a knee against the flag and thus against America. I view these people as truly unpatriotic and just ignorant of our history. Our military history is full of examples of what makes it the United States the greatest nation in the world. And everywhere I've served, from South Dakota to South Korea to South Africa, people recognize the red, white, and blue. While serving in Bosnia, I was walking to work one day in Sarajevo, and this little Bosniak lady came up, reached up, kissed the flag on my uniform, and in German said, "Danke, thank you." So to me, the flag represents freedoms and the ability to fight against oppression in places as Iraq, Afghanistan, Bosnia, the Korean Peninsula, and in Europe. And unfortunately, as I said, some of those that choose to disrespect the flag under this biased rhetoric that we hear today are just ignorant of the diverse sacrifice of many Americans that have had. If you look and you ever go to F.E. Warren, and you look at that Air Force base, and the first time around, so this doesn't look like any Air Force base I've been on. Well, it's an old CAV base, cavalry base, from when the Buffalo soldiers were there. And again, you look at how heroic and how well those Buffalo soldiers served in a time frame that today, I think, if any of them were here, they would be totally amazed on how certain people are disrespecting the flag. We had the Tuskegee Airmen in World War II. We had the famous Wind Talkers in the Marine Corps in World War II, the Navajo Indians that, because of their language, the Japanese could not break the codes, and the communications were able to go back and forth, and a lot of service members were alive because there was no ability to intercept the communications. In Hawaii, you have the famous 100th Infantry Battalion, and over in Hawaii they call it the 1 Puka Puka, which was made up of purely Japanese Americans that fought against the Nazis in Europe. And yet, it's interesting that when we hear this rhetoric of how bad America is, I see no lines of people lining up to leave America. I see lines of people at embassies throughout the world trying to come to the United States. I see a lot of people trying to come to the United States illegally. So if this is such a bad, terrible country, why is everybody trying to come here and be part of it? And it's just an interesting aspect that nobody who disrespects the flag can counter with. So, interesting, and I'll go in closing here, is that in China, recently we've seen some protests and things over there, and what are they waving? They're not waving the Chinese flag. These Chinese nationals are waving the American flag saying, we want democracy. We want freedom from oppression. We want to be like America. Just an interesting comment that we have Chinese nationals that are more American than some Americans that are living and breathing and enjoying the freedoms that they have here in the United States. So again, the flag to me means freedom and opportunities for all. My maternal grandfather also farm sugar beets out in Minnetonka, but had immigrated in from Russia. It was a German, one of those Volga Germans back in the day. And he hated communism. Everything in the world that he didn't like was due to communism. Whether it's true or not, he didn't care. But if you had long hair, you were a communist. If you'd gone to jail, you were a communist. If you were unemployed, you were a communist. But if you got out of jail, got a haircut, and got a job, then everything was forgiven. But he was so proud back in 1961 when he finally got his U.S. citizenship. And I was showing Cliff a photo of how he was so proud that day. He wore the one suit that he had a boutonniere in, because he always had flowers in his yard, German, you know, and he was holding the American flag. And to the day he died, he flew the red, white, and blue. So for those in the NFL that take a knee and they talk disrespect, what would they say to the family of Pat Tillman, who walked away from millions of dollars to play in the NFL to serve in the Ranger Regiment and lose his life in Afghanistan? What would they say to Bob Klaus? And most of these people don't know who he is, and he was the last American other than Pat Tillman to be killed in combat in Vietnam. He was an NFL offensive lineman. When I was wounded in Iraq, I had a young soldier by the name of Specialist Rufus E. Brown, the third, and that's an interesting name. But when he had passed, before he passed, we had a conversation one day about his younger brother who was playing at North Carolina State, I believe, or University of North Carolina, one of those two schools, and that he's so proud that his younger brother was going to get an opportunity to maybe go in the NFL. And Jason Brown was a center for the St. Louis Rams. And at the age of 29, he walked away from a contract for another 4 or 5 years to play in the NFL because he had a better calling. And he lives in North Carolina now. He learned to farm via the internet out here in Minnetonka, but he raises farm goods, sweet potatoes, cucumbers, those kind of things. And all that produce is given to Catholic charities, to the homeless, the people that need it. And so it wasn't about money to him. He said, hey, I raised enough money that I'll never ever have to do anything ever again in my life. My children are taken care of, my grandchildren are taken care of. But because my older brother gave his life in Iraq on September 20th, 2003, and I was there that night, he made a different sacrifice. So I'd love to hear what these people that have these kind of comments would have to say to families like that, or to Roger Staubach, or Rocky Blair, some of the famous NFL players that were veterans. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Steve. Cliff Miller, Operation Just Cause.
One of the few. I'm not trying to follow Steve. Everybody knows that Steve can talk, and I actually saw him that day at Fort Order Burger King, and I just ignored him because I knew he was quite the talker there. So,
Can't go wrong with a walk.
you know, I just got to sometimes walk away. Anyway, Cliff Miller. I spent 13 years in the Army. I spent several tours in light units and airborne and ranger units. I worked in the cartel wars down in Colombia back in 1982, 83, and 4. Worked against the Sandinistas in Honduras and Nicaragua at 84, 85. Operation Just Cause, as you stated, and then also worked in the Gulf the first time around when we should have been in things then. So other people wouldn't have to pass their deals. But I'd like to start off talking about the flag and the names of the flag. It's the Stars and Stripes, the red, white, and blue, and Old Glory, as we've learned. She's been a grand old flag, pictured in Washington's crossing the Delaware, as we've learned, being flown over the side during our Armistice Day, being flown in World War II at Iwo Jima with the 6th Marines. Do we remember P.S.C. LaGuerre raising her in Seoul, Korea in 1950? Or Schmidt's photo of the flag in a rucksack outside of Da Nang? What about the raising of the Old Glory in Panama during Operation Just Cause, over Baghdad during Operation Enduring Freedom, and in Afghanistan during our trials there with the Taliban? She is a symbol of peace and prosperity. She holds the colors of the red, white, and blue. The red for our brothers and sisters that have given their blood. The white stands for purity and their innocence of all just like young. The blue, her vigilance to stand diligent and observe over a great nation. She's my representation of why I served. She may be a tattered piece of cloth for some to burn or stomp on, but to me she represents freedom, hope, and truth. She has been with me on many missions in Central South America, Southeast Asia, and so many other places. I have carried her on my shoulder, in my rucksack, but forever in my heart and mind. The symbol of freedoms has always rang a bell in my head, from the parades to the rodeos, to high school sports and holidays. She's always been a constant reminder to me that I am a member of the best and strongest country in the world. I've witnessed this as a soldier, a student, and as an American. She has stood tall in my darkest hours. She has been shredded by muskets, cannonballs, rifles, machine guns, and terroristic bombs, but her colors never ran. I love those three colors of that old piece of cloth. She is our symbol that guards our way of life, never wavering and always standing strong, as we should. Join me in a salute to the stars and stripes, the red, white, and blue, in Old Glory. Thank you.
Next, Tom Arends would give us on what the flag means to him. Tom is the commander of our VFW Post.
Tom Arends, commander of VFW. I served in the Marines 65 to 68. I served in Vietnam, Da Nang, 66 and 67. I have an older brother that was in the Marines, and a brother after me were also in the Marines, and one brother was in the Navy. Dad was in the Army. He landed on Normandy Beach. He was wounded a couple days later and ended up in England. But the flag to me is an honor to be having it. I fly it daily, and I believe most people should be, and everything like that. Also, like doing the Pledge of Allegiance in the schools. I know we did it, all graduating, all years. All the kids did the Pledge of Allegiance every morning at school, and I believe it should be still doing that. So it's an honor to have the flag and everything like that. And I just, that's about all I need to say. So, thanks, Ron.
As you see, the flag means many things to all of us, mostly our relatives, our families, and our brothers and sisters that fought for the grand old flag. So with that, the American Union Post number 36 color guard will make the presentation on the 13-fold presentation. Cecil?
Color guard, stand up. Port, pounds. Right shoulder, pounds. Forward, march. Mark time, march. Hold. Center, face. Port arm. Present arms.
The first fold symbolizes life. The second fold symbolizes the belief in eternal life. The third fold is in honor of all veterans who served the United States. The fourth fold reminds us of our weaknesses and our failures so that we can learn from them and improve ourselves. The fifth fold is a tribute to our nation. The sixth fold symbolizes our hearts and reminds us that love for anything, including our nation, has to come from the heart. The seventh fold symbolizes the armed forces who protect the country and the flag. The eighth fold is in remembrance of all those who have died serving our country and in honor of all mothers who have lost children serving our country. The ninth fold is in honor of women who have contributed as to our nation as men have. The 10th fold is in honor of our forefathers. The 11th fold represents Judaism. The 12th fold represents Christianity. The 13th and final fold represents our national motto, "In God we trust."
Port arms. Right shoulder arms. Other guard. Halt. Port movement. Order movement. Fall out.
I want to thank the American Legion for presenting the 13th fold of the flag. With the closing, we'll have a reading of the meaning of each fold was given by Cecil Dosier. With closing, if he doesn't bring his phone, will be Frank Kenzy.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, I have been very well reminded of what that flag is. First of all, the blue is for the blue sky and freedom. Red is for the blood that has been shed for her all throughout the beginning because they were tired of a tyranny. And the white is for the purity and the honesty. And Lord, somehow we have lost our sight of what this is. They think it's just something to carry around and something to stomp on. And Lord, we're now in a crisis. And speaking from my own experiences, if it wasn't for you there is no way I would ever be here today. And I'm sure there's a bunch of others that can say this same thing. And it's no wonder to me why they want to go to alcohol and pills when they can go to the Bible and it'll give you proper instruction. And Lord, may this nation turn back to you and stop taking everything out of the Bible and all the flag being taught to the kids. Or because that's the only way back. We thank you for this opportunity. Be with us, guide and direct us. We ask it in thy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Frank. I want to thank everybody for coming and participating. And tomorrow, we raise the flag, June 14th. So,